Welcome to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. This is a podcast for faithful women who want healing in their relationships, guidance from God, and internal peace. Each week, you'll hear mental health concepts taught through a spiritual lens from me, a licensed clinical mental health counselor, to help you start thinking in a higher and holier way. I'm so excited about a very special guest we have on. This week, we are talking about 3 ways to minister to those who identify as LGBTQ. And I want to welcome to the podcast, Charlie Bird. Welcome.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. So for the very few people that might not know who you are, do you want to do a little introduction about who you are, what you kind of promote and teach people?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Charlie Bird. I actually grew up in Missouri in a super small rural town, grew up on a cattle ranch, and was really involved in my little community there and came to BYU for college, went on a mission to Southern California, Redlands, and San Bernardino. Actually, my mission
Awesome.
has changed its name. It just keeps like switching back and forth. Um,
That's so cool.
so, and went to BYU and have kind of been in Utah. I just fell in love with Utah, fell in love with the mountains, and then eventually fell in love with somebody from Utah. So I'm here now. But I identify as gay. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I do a lot of advocacy work in this space, really trying to build bridges between these two communities that historically maybe have not completely seen eye to eye.
Right.
And as someone who kind of belongs to both of these communities and also is kind of rejected by both of these communities, it's really
Yeah.
important to me that there is overlap here because I know I'm not the only one in this space. And
Yeah.
there are a lot of individuals and families who are trying to figure out how to bridge
Yeah.
these kind of cultural and social conflicts.
Yeah. Mm.
I'm not sure if you had a thought. It looked like
Yes, no, that's wonderful. I love that. I think there's just I think that's what people I have reached out to me for an episode is like I want to help people, my loved ones, my friends, people I minister to who identify as LGBTQ. And how do I do that when I feel like it sort of maybe conflicts or I hear different things? And I love, I would love to talk kind of about your books too, because I think you do a really good job of talking about modern revelation and what's been talked about in modern revelation, and that it's really our job to know what that modern revelation is and how things have changed.
Yeah, and I think with what you just said, it even hints at that we're in a different place kind of than we've ever been before. I still consider myself to be pretty young, but when I was going through like early adolescence, high school, I truly thought that I was the only person like me.
Mm,
And I wouldn't even have identified as gay, that the word was terrifying to me.
yeah.
And one thing that happens to a lot of LGBTQ plus people from conservative backgrounds is what we call internalized homophobia. So
Mm,
growing up, I knew there was something different about me, and my brain almost wouldn't let me comprehend that this is what it was.
yeah.
That makes sense. There was so much
Yep.
denial, and I started like um, hating gay people, hating the
Mm,
LGBTQ community, and kind of in hopes that it would never catch up to me,
yeah.
that it would never confirm my deepest fear about myself. And if I could avoid it, it would never happen.
Yeah.
Uh, and, interestingly enough, all that did was make me hate myself.
Mm,
And, I was projecting these things onto other people, and then they were being verified to myself that I wasn't enough, that there was
yeah.
something inherently wrong with me, that there was no way for me to ever truly fit in my family and my community and my religion and with my God, with my
Yeah.
creator. And that's some hard stuff to go through,
For
especially
sure.
as a kid. And like I said, I thought I was the only one for so long. And it turns out, with a little bit of hindsight, I see that there are thousands of kids that were similar to me going through the same thing and feeling alone. Um,
Yeah.
so my story was a little bit unique. I ended up Well, it's a little unique and a little not unique at all. I
Yeah.
served mission completely confident that when I came home I would be straight and I would reap the blessings of missionary service and went to BYU, was dating women. I went on dates with three girls a week.
Oh, wow.
So, like three first dates a week was my goal and went on so many first dates with so many wonderful women and like the brightest and best that our society has to offer. And I just
Yeah.
it wasn't working. Um,
Yeah.
and eventually I had to like look at myself and be like, you know what? This didn't go away. This
Yeah.
is still here. And that realization was coupled with just a lot of shame and depression. Um, again, just feeling like there was nothing for me. Like,
Yeah.
what's the point of being alive if you can't contribute and be a part of something? And it felt like that I was created on accident.
Yeah.
Like something in the mix up was wrong.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember at the time I was the mascot at BYU. I was Cosmo the Cougar,
Yeah.
and I was very successful as the mascot. I did flips and danced, and
Yes.
I've always loved social media and like presenting content. So I
Yeah.
started doing it with the mascot account and really going viral and blowing up and being something
Yeah.
bigger than
Yeah.
I ever imagined coming from my little small town that I would make any sort of impact like that.
Yep.
And then I just started kind of living in this duality of, this community, like the BYU community, loves me when I wear this mask.
Yeah.
Um, like, that there'd be lines and parents would say, I want my kid to be just like you when he grows up. And I just remember thinking, like, if they knew who I was,
Yeah.
they knew what really was under this, they
Yeah.
would hate me.
Yeah.
And I had to wear that other mask of pretending to be straight.
Yeah.
I ended up doing an internship in Washington, D.C., and for the first time was almost kind of forced to be around LGBTQ people at this internship. My Some of my supervisors were gay married men, and I was living at this international student house with people from a lot of different backgrounds. For the first time, I was interacting with these people, um, and it broke my worldview because
Mm.
they were good.
Yeah.
They were kind and creative and interesting. And I just remember feeling so confused. I was like, I'm a very religious person, and I remember praying and be like, God, what is this? Like, I always thought this was bad,
Yeah.
but now these people are valuable, and it was a paradigm shift. And I just remember saying, I've never, like, no one's, it's funny looking back. I had this thought, like, no one has ever been as confused as I am.
Yeah.
And as I had that thought, I thought about like the restoration and Joseph Smith. And I was like,
True. Yes.
hold up, like other people have been confused. And what did they
Yeah.
do? And I was thinking about this young boy who had these huge questions about salvation and his role um, in it, in
Yeah.
religion. And I just realized that I'd prayed so many times for God to take away my orientation
Mm.
or change me, but I never prayed to ask if it was on purpose.
Mm.
I should accept it, or if there was something I should do with it.
Yeah.
And that shift really changed my life. I ended up going to the temple and spending some time to prepare and ask those questions. And once I finally said that first real prayer, I felt love. I, I
Wow.
I felt my creator tell me that I was created
Mm.
intentionally and that I was
Yeah.
loved by
Yeah.
him. And what a gift to
Yeah.
correct these like fears I had that I was wrong.
Yeah.
Um, and I realized that by hiding from God, it was just disconnecting me from him.
Right. Right.
And by hiding from other people, it just created resentment and distance. I realized that I was lying to my family and my friends, and I felt so alone because I was living in the dark. And I
Right.
realized that day that I needed to start coming out and living in the
Mm.
light.
Mm.
And that changed my life.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. Like that is so vulnerable, first of all, to share that. So I appreciate that because I think so many people can um know what their loved ones might be going through or what they might be feeling. So I think that that sort of empathy that you helped us understand and feel can also help us minister better, right? That we need to know, be able to walk in somebody else's shoes to see what that feels like to be able to be there for them in that. So thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that.
and I almost can't not share it. It feels
Yeah.
like to me it's like I think it's Nephi when it says like sing the song of redeeming love. Am I right
Uh-huh.
on
I, I'm probably the wrong person to ask
that?
about. Like, I never know where anything is in the scriptures. I can tell you all the like type of doctrine, but like you tell me where or who said something.
That
I don't
is
know.
a concept in the scriptures, but
Yeah.
it just felt like I felt like redeemed. I felt
Yeah.
divine love, and I just like I have to sing it. I have to tell people about it. And that's
Yeah.
eventually what led me to become more open and active in kind of like an advocacy, like
Yeah.
bridge building space. And the my first book I wrote kind of as a book that I wish I would have had growing up.
Mm.
So the resources and the knowledge that was never like afforded to me, I
Yeah.
wanted to give that forward. And it was a really healing process to
Yeah.
look back at my life and notice where I was struggling and what someone like me could have used
Mhm.
in those different phases. It was really special. And then
Yeah.
after that, as you mentioned, so many people say, like, I'm a member of the church. I want to be an ally. I'm not exactly sure how.
Yeah.
That kind of led me to write a second book specifically geared towards allyship for the like active, committed member of the church.
Yeah.
Because there's so many good people that want to help, but just don't have the tools.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that both books are so amazing. And we'll link all of those in the show notes and talk about that. Well, the first one is called Without the Mask, right? Coming out and coming into God's light.
Yeah.
And then your second book is called Expanding the Borders of Zion.
Yep.
With that? Okay. Awesome. So yeah, I think both of them are so helpful in allyship, like you talked about, right? Like helping people understand that. They were so insightful and how you drew in the gospel and the gospel principles and helping us understand how they do fit together when sometimes we think that they don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Uh,
thank you. I'm glad that you've
yeah.
read them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
Actually, I
like my
listen to them. I'm a listener, but I loved listening to them.
So hopefully you're not sick of my voice.
No, I loved it. I love that's what I love listening to audiobooks, especially people who write their own books and then read them because you're like you can feel like the in their voice like really what's happening. So I would recommend listening to both of your books. I think that you did a fabulous job with that.
Yeah. Well, thank
Awesome.
you.
Yeah. So I think so as people are listening to this and they're thinking to themselves, like, I have someone in my life like Charlie. What can I do to help them? Let's talk about some ways that you know, women in the church, specifically women listen to this episode or to my podcast. So it's kind of the niche, but how can they minister to people who might be feeling some of those things or going through some of those same stages that you were going through to help provide that Christ-like love and be like, and you talk about in your book about being the Good Samaritan. How can they
Yeah.
do that?
Yeah, I would say the first step would be to kind of push against an us versus them mentality.
Mm,
Um, for a lot of my life and a lot of this culture, it really is, it's like religious versus LGBTQ. And we're kind of like pit against each other. But I think I am like to me, I'm an example of that there's crossover here, you
yeah,
know? Like part of me, like I am divinely created. I am inherently a spiritual being. I'm a child of God
yeah,
and who's made covenants. And also I can't like deny like the truth of my creation that I'm different. Like the way I love, like I'm oriented differently than the majority of people.
yeah,
And it's weird, right? To not view it as us versus them when it has been for
yeah,
so long. But to just truly try to accept that there is overlap here.
yeah,
And I think once that happens, there's this beautiful invitation for proximity.
yeah,
And proximity is so powerful because it changes the way we view things. It helps us overcome biases and it helps us overcome fears
yeah,
of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, or even like moving down like a slippery slope. Like I remember interacting with, like I said, interacting with like a gay person in a relationship for the first time was terrifying because
Yeah.
I didn't want them to like influence me negatively.
Yeah.
But I realized that like each LGBTQ plus individual is a beloved child of God and was created in his image
Yeah.
and things to learn about God as we learn about each other. And that proximity piece is going to be so instrumental in preparing a relationship where allyship can even exist. Because if you're
Yeah.
not ready to get there, um, like if you can't even have a relationship with someone, you can't support them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think of like, oh, well, I just think this is a good skill in general in lots of things, right? Like politics or something, right? Like, what if we didn't have an us versus them sort of mentality, right? But I think about it like as putting on a set of glasses, right? Like if we have orange tinted glasses and we're looking through the world as like you're wrong and I'm right, right? That's kind of the us versus them, or you're
Yeah.
this way and I'm this way, and there's no difference. If we can take those glasses off and we can put on our Christ-like love glasses, essentially, right? Like we're all children of God and we're all loved by God, with that view then changes how we might act or what we might say, what we might do for that person. Is that kind of what you're saying?
For sure. Without that, it kind of creates a moral hierarchy. And I think that's exactly what led to like
Yeah.
the Nephite nation and fourth Nephi created these ites and it's you're this and I'm this and we're different. Um, and that it leads to social, emotional, family destruction. And just even from a psychological standpoint, black and white thinking is a cognitive distortion that's
Yeah.
psychologically proven to make us feel trapped.
Yeah.
And I think, well, it's no wonder that so many people feel trapped when it comes to this topic because we're viewing it as so black and white, when the truth is there is nuance and there is perspective to be gained and earned through proximity.
Yes. I think that's true for a lot of gospel principles, right? This black and white, like it used to, feel like it used to be taught. Like I'm a convert, so I don't know necessarily how it used to be taught, but I feel like it was like a checklist sort of thing, right? Like we do these things. And I feel like the church is really going more towards this like personal revelation, and things can be different for different people because there's different circumstances. And not looking at the gospel as this black and white situation, but a personal relationship with God and what's best for you.
Yeah, and how wonderful that we have like prophets and apostles who are called to lead in our times. And I think sometimes we get caught up in, the messaging from the 60s or the 80s about gay people, gay marriage,
Yes.
when, the most recent prophetic counsel has been to be a peacemaker,
Yeah.
to lay down weapons,
Hmm.
to listen and learn and understand what LGBTQ people are feeling and experiencing. And I think that's how we're going to solve a lot of the division that we face.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that it's so important to take this modern revelation and put on those different set of glasses, right? With we're all on the same team. We're all trying to help each other. We're all brothers and sisters, and it doesn't have to be um pointing out what about somebody else that are differences with it with each other.
Mm,
Yeah, I
right.
love that. Okay, so first one is push against this us versus them mentality. What's another way that we can minister to people who might feel like they aren't connected to the church or connected to people in a way they want to be?
Yeah, I personally believe that the best way to be an ally is actually just to keep baptismal covenants.
Mm,
At baptism, we make these beautiful covenants to bear one another's burdens and to comfort those who stand in need of comfort. And when I look at the LGBTQ community, I see a lot of people who have been hurt,
yeah.
so deeply hurt with so much conflict and confusion, people whose lives and like souls are politicized and dissected. And um, there's so much like assumption
Yeah.
and I don't know, it just so many hurting people. And I see that as a clinician, I'm a clinical therapist, and I see that all the time. And I just think, how amazing would it be if rather than being scared of or threatened by LGBTQ individuals, members of the church, would see this as a community who experiences pain and
Yeah.
who works to be covenant keepers by bearing those burdens
Yeah.
and pain and really like trying to listen and understand where that is and offer solace.
I love that. I think I love that last piece you said there, like really our baptismal covenant in bearing one another's burdens isn't to go out there and necessarily like fix something, right? But it can be just to show up and listen without judgment, right? Just to
Yeah.
be there and create that safe environment.
Yeah. How amazing would it be if each person in the world had someone to go to with their
Yeah.
pain? Um, I and I love that listening without judgment piece. I think so for some reason we want to solve people's problems.
Right? It's human
And
nature. We're fixers.
and that's beautiful. Like what a beautiful intention.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that can sometimes fall flat because when you're dealing with something like same-sex orientation, there's
yeah.
a lot of questions, there's a lot of eternal unknowns. And I feel like we're so quick to be like, well, just do this.
Right,
Like
right.
prescribe some sort of solution. Just marry a woman, just leave the church, just marry a man,
Yep,
just whatever.
yep.
And that's so invalidating to the pain and heartbreak that can
Yeah.
exist in the meantime. And I just feel like for me in my life, people who have held that pain with me, that's given me the confidence to seek my own personal revelation, to make my own
Yeah.
decisions and use my agency and kind of like move through a wilderness space rather
Yeah.
than have like some destination assigned to me and feel like I have to do that or else I'll lose the love of the people who I care about.
Oh, I love how you said that because when we do offer these like solutions or fixing things, that is how someone feels on the other end, right? Like if you're not doing this, then this is what I want you to do, or else I might have some sort of reaction to that, right? And offering suggestions or ways to fix it, especially when they're not asking you for those, right? That can make them feel like that you want them to do that or else, right? In the relationship.
Yeah, and I think there's something so powerful about sitting with emotion, learning from what our
Mhm.
emotions are telling us, and like being connected to like just like mindfulness.
Yep. Yep.
And as we assign these solutions to the problem of being gay, it
Right.
it just pushes all that away and kind of bulldozes into yeah,
A,
everything we were.
a distancing in the relationship, them not feeling safe for you to talk to you about things, then you don't become that ally, right? Then you're no longer ministering to that person because you're creating distance between you and them. I think we often discount the healing, connecting power of listening, like truly, truly listening to hear what somebody else is saying, not to fix or react. That a lot of times I think people are listening to have a response or to say something, meaningful that will make it all better for somebody, right? And like you said, there's nothing that necessarily you can say that just makes everything better in lots of situations, right? But especially in this situation. And that person needs to receive their own personal revelation, not you telling them.
And religion and spirituality is often a source of pain
Yeah.
for queer people. And also queer might be a an interesting word for some people to hear. It's kind of being re
Yeah.
and it essentially means like anyone whose orientation or identity is different from the norm.
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
so it used to be a slur and it's kind of being reclaimed.
I
I
love that they're reclaiming it. I love that.
I used to hate the word and now I find myself using it more and more because it's just so like it's like peculiar. It's like people who are just unique, people who are a little bit different.
Yeah.
Um, And so it can be a source of religion can be a source of pain for queer people. And I think that also like sometimes I have felt that inhibit my ability to connect with God
Yeah.
because, God was often presented to me as this like authoritarian figure who is very demanding and doesn't care about where I'm at.
Yeah.
Uh, but if we can model Christ-like behavior, that can actually like as we model that, I really believe that helps LGBTQ individuals improve their relationship with deity because
Yeah.
it can kind of model what it's like to have a relationship with someone that feels safe and trusting and open, and then that can later be applied to heavenly parents.
Oh, I love that. Be that example, right? I mean, that's what our baptismal covenants are, though, right? Like they are emulating Christ and what he would do in these situations as well.
Yeah, the other piece of the baptismal covenant that I love is to take upon the name of Christ.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite names that Christ goes by is advocate.
Mm.
He's an advocate. So I really believe as we are advocates for our siblings who are hurting, that's how we take upon the name of Christ. And it's so beautiful to me how like Christ had this like opportunity and power and privilege. I know that can sometimes be like a buzzword for people,
Yeah.
but Christ had this like Christ laid down his life to solve a problem that never would have affected him. Just
Yeah. That's so true.
and and I feel like that's kind of what it means to be an advocate, to like listen to someone who says, "This is what's happening. This is how I'm hurting."
Yeah.
And it's so easy to be like, "Well, that's not
Mm.
happening. I've never heard of that."
Mm.
But say, I believe you. I
Right.
understand there's pain here. And
Yeah.
I'm going to do what I can with my power and my privilege to make more room for you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I've never thought about advocate that way, but that's so true. It's like something he took on all of our pains and burdens and sins, and they had nothing to do with him, but he was willing to do that for us. And are we willing to do that to be an ally in these moments and to be more like Christ?
Yeah.
I love that. That's beautiful. Oh, awesome. So keeping your baptismal covenants, listening, being an ally, being that advocate for somebody who um you feel like I maybe this isn't something that affects my life personally, but I want to help you and be there for you in this, right? Like Christ did. I love that. Okay, so what is one more way that we can minister?
The third way I like the first thing that comes to mind when you say that is work to overcome biases.
Mm,
And maybe that's a precursor for the other two. Or maybe they all are kind of working together at the same
mhm.
time. I don't know if it's like step by step, but it's fascinating to me because as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we know how to serve,
Yeah.
have serving hearts. We are ministers. We know how to take care of our community.
Mhm.
And yet, there's this one demographic of God's children that that doesn't apply to.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I really think it's because of this bias. It comes back to the us versus them and the not just the othering.
Yeah.
Um, and if we could, and this is actually why I titled my book Expanding the Borders of Zion. If we could
Yeah.
like expand our circle of love and our circle of service and ministering across the bias that we have for LGBTQ people,
Yeah.
imagine the healing that would happen. Because and I really think that like members of the church are such good allies. Like we know how to do this.
So true. We have a pattern for this already,
Good at this. We're like bred to do this.
right?
And if that can just be extended to people who are different or people who scare us, if we can work through our internal biases and lean into the discomfort
Yeah.
and apply those principles to all of God's children, so much of the temperature that exists between these like quote unquote between these two communities would just immediately be turned down. And I think we could see each other for who we are.
I love that. I was thinking as you're talking, I'm like, yes, I love this. And I feel like, in the social work realm, we know what a bias is, right? Like you and you say that, I know exactly what you mean. But I think sometimes when I'm talking to I don't know, like my parents or my in-laws, like when I say that word, they either have a negative connotation to the word bias or they don't even know what it means. Could
Yeah.
you give like a simple explanation of what it means to have a bias, maybe even towards LGBTQ individuals?
For me, bias would be like the stories you make up about someone before you get to know them.
I love that. Yeah.
And I hear this all the time, like when someone comes out as gay, they like assign morals to them. They assign
Mm,
interests to them. They assign um like things they hate or
yeah.
like to them. And like really rely heavily on stereotypes or
Yeah.
like media depictions of what it means to be gay.
Right.
And and here's the deal, when it comes to stereotypes, stereotypes aren't always untrue, but they're almost always incomplete, right? You're
Yeah.
not seeing a complete, full individual there, and it inhibits your ability to serve and
Yeah.
minister if you're not willing to see somebody as they are.
Yes. Yeah. And I think about like if someone made an assumption about you, right? Like if you're listening to this episode and you think about your life and someone just saw one aspect of your life and assumed all the rest of your life because they knew one tiny part of your life, right? Maybe even being a member of the church, right? That people hear you're a member of the church and they make all these assumptions about you, right? That you believe in polygamy or that, you my parents believed that I was joining this church where they had assigned you your husband. Like I was going to get my husband assigned to me, and that's who, arranged marriages. Like people can make assumptions about you. And what does that feel like when someone makes an assumption about you and then treats you as if that assumption is true, right? And that
Yeah.
what that might feel like to be in a position like that.
That's such a pretty way to internalize that concept, to like apply it to yourself. What does it feel like when you're judged and when people make assumptions about you because you're a woman, because you're a mom, or because
Yeah.
you're a Republican, or because you're a Democrat, or because you're a member of the church? Like we assign these crazy things to people that
Yeah.
creates distance rather than getting to know someone.
Yes. Yes. That's like and when you say working to overcome those biases, what you're saying is like really confront your stories, right? Like what is that story that you're automatically assuming about somebody and saying, "Wait a second, is that even true?" Or maybe part of that's true, but maybe I need to ask them, right? Maybe I need to figure out what's really is going on here and what's more to this than just this small part that I'm assigning to them.
Story, multiple data points before you assign a label, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's another, like, labels are kind of like an interesting thing in this community. People say, like, why do you need to label yourself?
Yeah.
Um, and like, why is it such a big deal? Why do you always talk about this? I think identities matter most when they impact the way someone's viewed and treated. And so it makes sense. Like, if, and again, I'm going to take it to that, like, I love that religious example.
Yeah.
So growing up, I did not live in an area where many other members of the church lived. And I
Yeah.
was like a Mormon kid. And it
Right.
came a lot at school because it othered me. It was different. And people weren't allowed to be my friend because I was quote unquote Mormon, because I
Yep.
had this religious affiliation. I was scary, dangerous, bad. And so
Yeah.
it kind of like became a thing
Yeah.
because people made it a thing.
Yeah.
And I think similarly, um, like now I live in Utah, and when I go to church, I'm actually married. I have a husband, and we go to church,
Right.
and we're gay, and people treat us differently because of it. So then it becomes a thing, right? And then it's
Right.
like, does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. That's a really great example because if someone has this assumption about you because you and your husband are attending church, that's going to affect how they interact with you or choose not to interact with you, right? Or what they might do with you.
Right. And like, what a loss if we keep doing that to each other, and like we lose out in the value that people have, the meaningful ways that we can contribute to society or to a congregation, but we also lose out on the lessons and the pain.
Mhm.
And what a shame to go through life and not learn from other people.
I love that. I love that. Yes. Are we really trying to only learn from people who believe the same things as us? And what does that do to our growth and learning, right? If we're only willing to interact with people who only believe the same way we believe or think the same things that we think or have the exact same experiences that we have had in our lives.
Yeah. It's uncomfortable.
It
It
is.
is. And yet, like how much growth and how often does the gospel teach us that growth is uncomfortable?
Yeah.
mission when you're 18, so uncomfortable, and yet look at the growth. Leaving the Garden of Eden, so uncomfortable, and yet
Yeah.
look at the growth.
Yeah.
Um, and also, it's like this isn't completely mine. I was listening to a podcast with two women I love and respect, Laurel Day and Zandra Brains, and they were kind of talking about discomfort. And Zandra, I think, said like, well, that's why we have the comforter. Like God wants us to be uncomfortable, or else like that's why he gave us the Spirit. The Holy Ghost
Yeah.
role is to comfort us. So he knew we'd be uncomfortable. He knew that to progress and like go through this mortal experience, we would inherently have to become uncomfortable and
Yes.
have that comfort.
Ooh, I love that thought.
And I believe if you can combine God and the Spirit with your allyship, like there you go, right?
Yes.
Like, oh
Yes.
yeah, God knows us. He understands our hearts, and He can help inspire us for the things to say, the things to not say,
Yeah.
things to clear up, the times where we need to communicate more, the times where we need to communicate less. I really believe this can be a symbiotic relationship with God, so that we can bless His children.
Yes. I love that because I think the atonement that Christ made for us is so that he knew exactly what we were thinking, feeling, and experiencing so he could provide what we need in those moments, right? So the person that you're ministering to Christ can convey to you what they need, right? Or what you need to do to in that moment, right? Like you said, talk more, talk less, or these simple things that we can do to minister, and that the more that we work to become closer to the Holy Ghost and receive those messages and understand those messages, but our biases can interfere with the Holy Ghost telling us that, right? The Holy Ghost is also an influencer of our thoughts. If we are in control and we're saying, nope, our thoughts have to stay right here, how can the Holy Ghost influence those thoughts if you are controlling them? Your biases control your thoughts.
That's beautiful. And like the prophet has recently said that good revelation comes from good information. If you
So
don't
true.
have good information about someone, if you're making assumptions or you refuse to accept realities, then how can you expect to receive good revelation on how to manage those relationships or minister?
Yes. So really overcoming your biases help you receive better revelation and get better information too, right? Because you're challenging that. You're saying maybe this bias that I have isn't necessarily true. Maybe I need to go look at and ask for this information, get better information from this person.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I think if everyone were to even just set that a goal, even just have that peripherally in the mind, like I said, so much of this temperature and contention could just be turned down.
So true. So true. Yes. And I love the concept, like tying all these back together is like, we're not trying to be ites here, right? Like we're not trying to be ites and create contention, right? That's all about a peacemaker that President Nelson's talking about. It's like conflict needs to be overcome and we need to work towards not having conflict in any relationship. And your work, living your baptismal covenants, overcoming your biases, right? Help you be able to have more of that peacemaker mentality, right? And bury that us versus them mentality with that.
I fully believe that Heavenly Father knows and cares about his LGBTQ children and he
100%.
sees that pain. And I just know that God is waiting for people to ask how to help, and he has information. There is like so much light and knowledge to be given to
Yeah.
those who ask.
Yes. I just think back to Joseph Smith, right? Like he was so confused. And what did he do? He asked, right? Like how much revelation was poured out upon him because he was willing to ask in a confused state and how uncomfortable he might have been.
The prayer you don't, the prayer I didn't want to ask, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Prayer that I didn't know if I was allowed to pray.
Right.
The
Yeah.
thing got me into gear.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe that's being a minister too is like what prayer do you need to be saying that you're holding back from saying? Like what are the questions you need to be asking in order to minister, to get in that uncomfortable state so the comforter can come in and tell you what to do?
So lovely. That's very lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. This was beautiful. Thank you for sharing all your light and knowledge. And I know that being an advocate and sharing your story isn't easy. I know that the internet is cruel and mean on so many fronts, right? But to
Right.
be someone who feels that contention from both sides, right? No matter what you share, you're going to feel contention from both sides. And I can't imagine what that's like, putting yourself willingly into that state. But I'm grateful that you would do that for all the people that need your love and help. So thank you.
It's very kind. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about your podcast. I love the new focus that you have and the change that you guys made, because I feel like if people heard this episode and they're like, I need this in my life, that is a great place to go. So tell us a little bit about the name change and what came with that, because I love all the super cool things that are coming on it.
Yeah, so for the past 4 years, I've been co-hosting a podcast called Questions from the Closet with my friend Ben Shalati. And it started by taking questions submitted by closeted students at BYU and just kind of like talking about them in an open forum. A lot of like, should I come out? How do I come out? And really, like, we covered a lot of basics for individuals and kind of grew into family members and allyship. And I think that's an incredible resource, a great place to begin the journey if you're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Episodes are all still there. And, in the past 6 months or so, we've been looking at the new landscape and how people's questions have been shifting. And it's not so
Yeah.
much about should I come out or not? It's like, how do I make this work? Like, how do I become more involved? And it seems like there's more education and more openness in this space. And we wanted to do something that reflected that and also accounted for the diversity, the global diversity
Yeah.
of LGBTQ experiences in an LDS context. And so we brought on new contributors, renamed the podcast. It's called All Out in the Open now. And it just feels like lighter. And I want to help people pioneer their paths. I want to help people move through this like wilderness place with resources and hope and and God, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been great to build this new community.
Yes, I love the different contributors that you're going to have on to talk about all those different things. And I loved the story about your logo, where that came from. And I still think you should make the doormats. I think that I think you should do it.
Maybe we'll get there. Yeah,
Yes.
I think it's just a beautiful testament that God cares about us and he prepares things. And if we're willing to look, he's like, hey, go down this hallway. Like,
Yeah.
I've got a place for you. Um,
Yes.
cool.
Yeah. Often when we receive revelation, I think we think it's for a certain direction, right? Like we're supposed to make these doormats, right? But it was all to meet this person so she would create your logo for you, and it all lined up perfectly. Like God knew he had to get you to this person, so he influenced you over here with the doormat.
And then he's like, dead end, but you met someone.
Right? Yes, yeah, I love it. I love the new focus of the podcast. I love everything that you and Ben are doing. I think it's amazing, and all how that just grew, right? To have wonderful people who have come and contributed to the podcast and now can help provide more resources for people. It's just so amazing. So everyone go follow the podcast now. If you were already following it, it keeps on there, right? Because you just changed the name and you're good there. But definitely go check out those episodes. Also, follow Charlie on Instagram. You're amazing. What is your handle? Because it's so fun.
Mr. Charlie Bird is my handle, and I like share serious stuff, but then also like at the end of the day, I was a college mascot. So I'm always like dancing or pranking or doing some ridiculous thing, and I love to travel.
Yes.
It's been really fun. It's been fun to kind of like document um my new relationship. I got married last year,
Yes.
and again, kind of like this interesting space where we're a same-sex couple and we still go to church and we're just trying to like figure out what that means and looks like, and
Yeah.
it's fun to share the journey.
Yes. No, you guys are amazing. I love all your traveling things, seeing you show up in the world. It makes me feel like maybe I could do this one day. Maybe I could leave the country and go somewhere. But I love that you can do that. You can from, you're talking about traveling and then hiking and then you're talking about, advocating and sharing these hard things. Like you do it all and I just love that you're doing that. So thank you. I know it's not easy, but thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor to be here and have this conversation.
Yes, thank you for coming on. Appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. I hope you were able to find ways of healing, guidance, and peace. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend who would love to start thinking in a higher and holier way as well. Or hit that follow button so you don't miss out on any episodes. Also, check out the links in my show notes for other episodes you might like and links for other mental health resources on my website.